The morning sun reflected off the tall windows of Manhattan's buildings, casting golden streaks across the busy street. Cars sped in continuous waves, workers jostled for space on the sidewalks, and time seemed to run faster there than anywhere else. Amidst that relentless pace, a private driver discreetly parked a black sedan in front of Metropolitan Children's Hospital. The rear door opened with mechanical smoothness, revealing Leonard Hale, one of the country's most influential businessmen, known as much for his fortune as for his imperturbable coolness in the face of any situation. Hale wore an impeccable suit, tailored to the millimeter, but his face carried the tension of someone who breathed shallowly and thought too much. He used to move through billion-dollar meetings with the elegance of a maestro, but now he walked with the heavy steps of someone entering unpredictable territory. His bodyguards surrounded him, discreet but attentive. At the hospital entrance, a medical team awaited him. The head nurse, a woman in her 50s with a firm posture and observant gaze, was the first to approach. "Mr. Hale, Dr. Goldberg is expecting you." His voice was calm, trained to handle chaos. Leonard simply nodded and followed her down the sanitized corridor, where the smell of disinfectant seemed to permeate the very soul. He tried to maintain his composure, but his hands betrayed nervousness when they touched. He passed children in wheelchairs, tired parents, hurried doctors, and for a moment, just one, his eyes met a boy sitting alone on a bench, swinging his feet, holding a worn-out doll. Leonard immediately looked away. He had more pressing matters to attend to. The room he entered was small but comfortable. The doctor was standing, analyzing illuminated test results on a screen. When he turned around, his expression conveyed the gravity of someone who needs to deliver difficult truths. "Mr. Hale," he began, getting straight to the point, "your father is in critical condition. The infection has spread, and the coma has deepened." It was like a silent blow. Leonard Hale wasn't a man used to being surprised. When young entrepreneurs trembled before him, he rarely blinked. When journalists tried to provoke him, he stood as still as a stone. When investors demanded answers, he delivered them with surgical precision. But now, it was different. Because despite all the power he had amassed, there was something he had never been able to control. Time, especially the time that was stealing from his father. The doctor continued, carefully choosing each word. "It's important that you are prepared. The next few hours will be crucial. If we want to try a new procedure, we need your immediate authorization." Leonard took a deep breath, adjusted his tie as if to reorganize his thoughts, and replied firmly, "I authorize it. Do whatever is necessary." As soon as he left the room, he felt the weight of the decision. He walked aimlessly through the corridors until he stopped before the large window overlooking the outside courtyard. He saw children playing outside, some accompanied, others alone. And there was the lonely boy again, the same one he had seen when he entered. Now he was sitting on the grass, manipulating the doll with meticulous movements. There was a certain silent determination in his gestures, something almost too adult for someone so small. Leonard's attention wandered when his cell phone vibrated, an automatic meeting reminder. He pressed the button to end it. Ignoring appointments was something he never did, but today would be different. His father was between life and death. Nothing else mattered. His bodyguards kept their distance, but watched everything attentively. The oldest of them, Harris, ventured a comment. "Sir, you don't seem well. Would you like to sit down for a while?" "I'm fine," Leonard replied automatically, but he wasn't. He walked to a secluded outdoor area where he leaned against a metal railing. He took a deep breath, trying to ignore the feeling that he was losing control, something he deeply detested. His father had always been the only one capable of making him feel small, even as an adult, even after his success. And now, facing the possible end, he realized how much he had never told his father what he truly needed to say. When he returned to the lobby, something unexpected happened. The boy from the bank approached him. He appeared silently in front of Leonard, holding the doll in one hand and looking up with those dark, intense eyes. "Hi," said the boy without any fear. Leonard frowned. He wasn't used to being approached by strangers, much less children. "Are you lost?" he asked. The boy shook his head. "No, I just wanted to say that I know why you're sad." Leonard stiffened. The last thing he wanted was to talk, much less hear remarks from a stranger. "My father can't answer right now," he said, with controlled impatience, "so I need some space." But the boy didn't back down. And what he said next was so unexpected, so direct, that it ripped Leonard from his own emotional armor. The boy stood firm before Leonard, showing no fear, hesitation, or shame. He was small, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, but there was something in his eyes, a kind of silent, almost mature understanding, that disconcerted even the most seasoned of adults. Leonard tried to maintain an impersonal tone, as he did in difficult negotiations, but the boy seemed impervious to any kind of intimidation. "You said you know why I'm sad," the businessman repeated, now more curious than annoyed. "And why do you think that?" The boy held up the doll, as if it were part of the explanation. "Because I also have a father who doesn't answer." The phrase hit Leonard like a light but precise punch. There was no exaggeration, no drama. It was simply a fact, stated with the raw simplicity of a child who already understood too much. Before Leonard could answer, the head nurse walked past them and smiled at the boy. "Oliver, have you taken your medicine today?" "Yes, I did," he replied, still looking at Leonard. The nurse continued on her way, but her brief comment was enough to ignite something within the businessman. Oliver. The name echoed in Leonard's mind, as if he had heard it before, although he was certain he had never seen the boy. Oliver sat on the bench where he had been earlier and patted the space next to him. "You can sit here too." Leonard hesitated. It made no sense to accept the invitation. He was a busy man, an important man, and his world was crumbling inside that hospital. But something about that boy, something in the way he spoke, in the calmness he exuded, sparked an involuntary curiosity. He sat down. Oliver held the doll against his chest and began to speak without Leonard needing to ask. "My father hasn't spoken to me in 3 months. The boy's eyes followed the movement of an ambulance parking outside. "He's sleeping for a long time. Sometimes I think he can hear me, but he can't move anything." Leonard felt his stomach clench. 3 months. His father had been in a coma for only 2 weeks, and he already felt on the verge of collapse. The idea of someone so young dealing with this for so long made him uncomfortable. "And your mother?" he asked, not realizing that his voice had become softer. "She lives here with me." Oliver pointed to the building next door, the hospital annex for long-term families. "She says I'm strong, but—" The boy lifted the doll and wiggled one of its limp legs. "Actually, I just don't want her to be sad." The answer was so simple and so profound that Leonard couldn't speak for a few seconds. A silence hung in the air, and for the first time in many years, he didn't try to fill it. He simply watched the boy play with the doll, moving it carefully, as if any sudden movement could hurt someone who wasn't there. In the distance, his bodyguards remained vigilant. Harris watched the boy suspiciously, as if any stranger could be a threat. But Leonard subtly raised a hand, dismissing any interference. Oliver continued, "My doll's name is Frank. He also has a father who doesn't answer." The boy smiled shyly. "I think that's why he understands." Leonard almost laughed. Almost. But the smile faded quickly when the words, "a father who doesn't respond," echoed again. It wasn't just old Hale's critical condition that troubled him. It was everything he'd never said, everything he'd avoided for years. Memories surfaced in flashes, old arguments, slammed doors, broken promises, missed phone calls. His father had been a tough man, but present. He, on the other hand, had only become present in his absence, appearing when there was trouble, disappearing when there was peace. And now perhaps it was too late to fix it. Oliver looked up and stared at him in an uncomfortably direct manner. "You don't look bad." "I'm not bad," Leonard replied, almost as an instinctive defense. But it seemed sad for a long time. The simplicity of the phrase struck him like a precise blow. Leonard was used to expensive psychologists, counselors, consultants, journalists, investors. None of them had ever said anything so direct and so true. It was almost as if that boy could see beyond the polished surface of the impeccable businessman. "Oliver!" a female voice called out. A woman in her 30s approached, wearing a visitor's badge and looking tired. "Son, lunch is ready." Oliver turned to Leonard and before leaving said, "If you want, I can show you where I stay. It's nice there. It doesn't look like a hospital." And then she added quietly, "Sometimes it helps." The boy ran to his mother but kept looking back until he disappeared down the hallway. Leonard remained seated, feeling something he couldn't name. Vulnerability? Fear? Curiosity? Perhaps all of the above. When he finally stood up, Harris approached him. "Sir, would you like me to move the boy away next time?" Leonard shook his head. "No." The answer came firmly. "He's not a problem." But deep down, he knew that Oliver could very well be exactly that. A problem he didn't know how to deal with, because it couldn't be solved with money, influence, or power. And somehow, inexplicably, he knew he would speak to that boy again. The following hours passed with a torturous slowness that usually dominates hospital environments. Leonard Hale, accustomed to schedules orchestrated down to the minute, felt disoriented for the first time in many years. Time there followed no logic whatsoever. It either dragged on like a weight or advanced without warning. He tried to focus on his father's condition, on the clinical decisions, on the medical reports, but his mind insisted on returning to Oliver, to the boy and the things he had said. When Dr. Goldberg reappeared in the hallway, Leonard stood up almost immediately. "Any news?" he asked, letting a nervousness he had been trying to hide show through. "We are stabilizing your father," the doctor said calmly. "The response to the new protocol is slow, but it's happening. However—" Leonard hated the word however. It was a favorite of doctors trying to soften the blow. "However," the doctor repeated, "we need to keep him under constant observation. There could be abrupt changes." Leonard nodded and thanked him, but the air seemed increasingly heavy. He walked away, wandering aimlessly, following instincts that led him to the hallway where Oliver used to sit. And there, sitting once more on the same bench, was the boy, the doll in his lap, the same attentive gaze. "You're back," Oliver said, without fully lifting his face. "Did I say I'd be back?" Leonard asked. "No. But it seemed like it was going to. People who need to talk always come back." Leonard let out a short sigh, almost a laugh. "Who told you that?" "Me." Simplicity disconcerted him. Seeking attention, he spoke like someone who simply observed life with precision. Leonard sat down beside him, repeating the gesture from last time. He wasn't conscious. His body seemed to know before his mind. "And your father?" the boy asked. "He's struggling," Leonard replied, staring at a distant point on the wall. "Some minutes better, some minutes worse." Oliver swung his legs and squeezed the doll. "That's right. My father struggles too. But sometimes I think he's tired." Leonard swallowed hard. "You shouldn't think like that." "Nobody should think about a lot of things," Oliver replied. "But they do." The boy was too uncomfortable a mirror for a man who had spent his life avoiding his own reflection. Suddenly, Oliver's mother appeared in the hallway, a folder of documents in her hand, her expression tense. She stopped when she saw them talking. "Oliver, dear, let Mr. Hale rest. He needs time." Leonard gently raised his hand. "Everything's fine. He's not bothering me." The woman seemed surprised. Few there knew who the man was, but his demeanor betrayed his power. She hesitated, then smiled gratefully. "I'm Emily," she introduced herself. "I'm Oliver's mother." "Leonard," he replied, offering a hand which she shook rather gently. "Thank you for talking to him. It's been a difficult time." Her gaze carried sleepless nights, painful decisions, and a strength that didn't waver even under extreme exhaustion. Leonard recognized it. The same strength he saw in some executives, only here there was something more genuine, more raw. "If it's not too much trouble," she continued, "I'll take Oliver for his routine checkup, but he can talk to you afterward if he wants." Leonard nodded, and he realized that, strangely, he really did want it. Later, while walking through the hospital's inner courtyard, Leonard received a call he preferred not to answer. The screen displayed the name Brian Wilkes, his corporate right-hand man. "We need you at the meeting with the board directors," Brian insisted as soon as Leonard answered. "There are issues regarding the acquisition of the logistics company. We can't wait days." Leonard took a deep breath. "My father is unconscious, Brian. I'm not leaving here." "I know, but—" Brian hesitated. "The media is asking about your absence. Some shareholders are anxious. The board wants a statement. Best tell the council to wait." There was a long silence on the line. "Leonard, this doesn't sound like you. Perhaps because today I am not the man they want me to be." Leonard hung up before Brian could insist. The conflict intensified. The corporate world demanded his presence, while the real world, the one involving life, death, and humanity, pulled him in the opposite direction. He was on the edge between two identities that had never coexisted peacefully. When he returned to the lobby, Oliver was sitting on the floor, leafing through a children's book without much attention. Upon seeing Leonard, the boy closed the book and walked over to him. "My mother said you're fighting with someone," she commented. Leonard raised an eyebrow. "I didn't say anything to her." "No need. You seem like someone who argues with everyone." "Yeah, sometimes." "I don't like to argue," Oliver said, leaning back in one of the armchairs. "But sometimes it's the only way to get people to listen to you." The comment was as unexpected as it was true. That was exactly how Leonard behaved in the business world, and perhaps that's why he was so tired of himself. "And you, Oliver," he asked, diverting his own introspection, "what do you do when you're sad?" The boy thought for a few seconds. "I'm looking for someone who understands." Leonard hesitated, feeling the impact of that response. Seeking someone out? He hadn't done that since his youth. He had always believed that weakness was something to be hidden, never shared. Before he could answer, an alarm sounded in the distance. Nurses began to run. Oliver's eyes widened and he grabbed Leonard's arm. "Is that my father?" Emily appeared seconds later, looking terrified. "It's room 307, she said almost voicelessly. Oliver looked at Leonard, waiting, fearing, pleading without words. And Leonard understood that it was there, at that moment, that the true conflict was beginning to reveal itself. The hallway leading to room 307 seemed longer than any hallway Leonard had ever walked, longer than the boardrooms on Wall Street, longer than the auditoriums where he announced billion-dollar mergers. It was as if time had become distorted, lengthening each step. Emily walked ahead, tense but determined. Oliver struggled to keep up, his steps short, almost running, the Frank doll pressed against his chest. Leonard followed close behind, guided more by instinct than reason. He didn't know why he was keeping up, it wasn't his business. But at the same time, it was in a strange and unavoidable way. When they reached the end of the corridor, two nurses were hurriedly leaving the room. "He's stable," one of them said, noticing the despair etched on Emily's face. "The monitor went off due to a sudden change, but it's back to normal now." Emily leaned against the wall, relieved. Oliver took a deep breath and squeezed the doll tightly. "Can I see him?" the boy asked. "Of course, dear," replied the mother. Emily went inside, and Oliver followed her. Before closing the door, however, Oliver turned briefly to Leonard. "You can come too." And the door remained ajar, like a silent invitation. The room was lit by the cold glow of hospital lights. Machines monitored every beat of the man's heart in the bed, a man too young to be there, perhaps in his 40s, with an expression too calm for someone fighting for his life. His chest rose and fell slowly. Oliver approached the bedside, placing the doll next to his father's hand. "He likes it when I leave Frank here," she explained. "I think it helps him not to feel lonely." Leonard stood near the door, observing the scene with a strange mixture of tenderness and discomfort. He had never been good with hospital environments. He had never known how to deal with the fragility of others, or his own. Emily adjusted the sheets and monitored vital signs, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in a world that was slowly crumbling. "He was a science teacher," she said, noticing Leonard's silent presence. "The kind of person who makes children believe that anything is possible until life changed without warning." Leonard nodded, unsure what to say. He watched Oliver hold his father's hand and speak softly, as if he believed each word could travel to some deep point in his sleeping consciousness. "I'm here, okay? I'm waiting for you to wake up." That short phrase hit Leonard hard, because he had never said anything like it to his own father, not even when there was still time, not even when pride shouldn't have mattered. He moved a little closer. "Do you want to speak to him?" Oliver asked, without turning around. Leonard hesitated. Then slowly he replied, "I think so." The boy made room beside the bed. Leonard approached, smelling the hospital odor mingling with the faint scent of someone once full of life. His eyes scanned the face of the unknown man, trying to understand why it affected him so deeply. "He won't answer now," Oliver said, repeating his earlier words, "but sometimes he listens." Leonard felt his own voice falter. "You are very brave, Oliver." The boy shrugged, as if courage were merely an inevitable consequence of life. The main subplot was taking shape there. Leonard's past and the story of Emily and Oliver began to intertwine organically, creating emotional layers that made any emotional distance impossible, and the tension was rising. While Oliver adjusted the doll on the pillow, Emily approached Leonard. "He likes you," she said softly. "I don't know why, but he does." "I like him too," Leonard replied without thinking. Emily smiled, a small but genuine smile, the kind of smile that only appears when someone recognizes something good amidst chaos. "You know," she continued, "Oliver and his father were returning from a trip when the accident happened. A distracted driver, a wrong turn. He survived with a few scratches. His father never woke up again." Leonard closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the weight of that story. He felt the pain of the woman, the boy, of a cruel fate that took more than it gave. "I don't know what's worse," Emily said, "the waiting or the fear that the waiting will end." Leonard stared at her with unusual sincerity. "It's even worse when you realize you wasted too much time before all of this." Emily held his gaze, surprised. She seemed to understand that those words came from a deep place, something unspoken that Leonard had carried for decades. That's when Leonard's phone vibrated again. Brian had sent a message. "Urgent. Board meeting in 20 minutes. We need you." He turned off the screen immediately. When she left the room, she found Harris in the hallway. "Sir, are you ready to return to the hotel?" the security guard asked. "No," Leonard replied. "I'll stay here." "For how long?" "For as long as it takes." But necessary now meant something different. It wasn't just about his father. It was about himself, about Oliver, about the chance to not repeat mistakes. A few hours later, while Emily was sorting out paperwork with social services, Oliver pulled Leonard out onto the patio. "There's something I want to show you," said the boy. He led him to a small tree planted in the garden. There were plaques with names and dates, dedications from people who had been in that hospital. It was a space of memory and hope. "I planted this one," said Oliver, touching a small plaque with his name on it. "People said that when the tree grows, it means we've grown too." Leonard looked at the boy, then at the tree. He felt an emotion he had hardly recognized. "You've grown so much, Oliver." The boy smiled, but there was something different in his eyes. something Leonard didn't yet understand, but which would soon take on meaning, because that tree, that gesture, that silent subplot, it was all preparing the ground for something bigger, something that would change everyone's lives there, forever. The sun was beginning to set behind the hospital's large windows when Emily returned to the courtyard. She found Leonard sitting on the concrete bench, watching Oliver run in small circles around the tree he had planted. The cool wind gently rustled the still young leaves, and a comfortable silence hung in the air. "He likes you," Emily repeated, as if trying to reaffirm something she herself was still processing. "I like him too," Leonard replied without taking his eyes off the boy. Emily sat down beside him. For a moment they were silent, just watching Oliver play alone, as if the world outside wasn't falling apart. "You know you don't have to stay," she said softly. "I know," Leonard replied. "But I want to stay." Emily bit her lower lip, a gesture of unease. "You're a very busy man. I don't want to disrupt your life." Leonard let out a short, humorless laugh. "Emily, I've spent my whole life too busy for my employees, for my friends, for myself. My father." Emily stared at him, surprised. It was the first time Leonard had spoken openly about himself, without masks, without prepared phrases. "When was the last time you saw him?" she asked. Leonard hesitated. 4 years ago." Emily's eyes widened. 4 years? "Leonard, that's a long time." "I know," he said, "and every time I think about it, I realize it might be too late now. I don't know if he'll wake up. I don't know if he'll recognize me. And if I go into that room, and he doesn't know who I am, I don't know what I'll do." The vulnerability in her voice was new, almost disconcerting. Emily placed her hand over his, a simple gesture, but one laden with understanding. "Perhaps it's too late for answers," she said, "but it's never too late to be present." Leonard swallowed hard. Before he could answer, Oliver rushed toward them, breathless and excited. "Come on, Leonard, I want to show you something else." He took the billionaire's hand naturally, as if they were old friends. Emily smiled as she watched them run together through the garden. An unlikely scene, almost impossible to imagine a few hours earlier. Minutes later, Oliver took him to a large room near the pediatric area. It was a space with toys, books, and colorful papers pasted on the walls with children's drawings. "This is where we go when we don't want to think too much," the boy explained. "Mom says it's the cloud breaker." Leonard smiled genuinely, the truest smile he'd given in a long time. "Did you do any drawing today?" he asked. Oliver nodded and ran to a table, bringing back a colored sheet of paper. "I made this one. It's you." Leonard picked up the paper. On it were 3 figures, a woman, a boy, and a tall man holding the child's hand. The lines were crooked, but full of life. "Is that me?" Leonard asked, touched. "Uh-huh. You're holding my hand so I won't be sad." The billionaire swallowed hard. That simple phrase hit him like a blow. Before he could react, someone called his name. "Mr. Hawthorne?" Harris was standing in the doorway holding his cell phone. "They want you to participate in the meeting. It's important." Leonard took a deep breath. His old life was calling him back. The life where inconvenient feelings were discarded, where emotional commitments were replaced by contracts, reports, and billion-dollar decisions. "I'm going now," he replied. But Oliver held her hand. "You can't go now," the boy said, repeating the exact same words that had started everything that morning. "He needs you." Leonard crouched down until he was at the boy's level. "Who needs me?" "The young man in the room," Oliver replied. "And my mother, and me." The world stopped. As if suddenly everything made sense. These were not words spoken on a whim. They were true, coming from the soul of a child who had had to grow up too fast. Leonard took a deep breath. "Harris," he called without taking his eyes off Oliver. "Tell Brian I'm still out today, and that he can conduct the meeting without me." The security guard's eyes widened. "But sir, this is going to cause problems." "Some problems are worth it," Leonard replied. "This is one of them." When they returned to the room, Emily was sitting next to her unconscious husband. She looked up when she saw them enter. "Is everything all right?" he asked, noticing Leonard's expression. "It is," he replied, "more than I imagined." Emily smiled, but there was something uneasy in her eyes, as if she wanted to say something but didn't have the courage. "Leonard, try. I need to ask you something." Silence hung in the air for a few seconds. "Why are you doing all this? For us?" He took a deep breath. "Because maybe I'm trying to do for you what I couldn't do for my father." Emily lowered her gaze. Oliver approached the bed and placed the Frank doll back next to his father. That's when the heart monitor beeped. A sharp, rapid, unexpected sound. Emily jumped up. "What is happening?" The husband's heart had suddenly raced. Irregular, intense, erratic beats. Nurses rushed into the room. Leonard pulled Oliver back, protecting him. "Mom!" the boy shouted. "Everything's fine, darling," Emily said, but her voice trembled. The doctor arrived shortly after, quickly assessing the vital signs. "He's responding," murmured the doctor, surprised. "The activity has increased." Emily's eyes widened. "That is good. It means something is happening, something different." Oliver gripped Leonard's hand tightly. And then, for the first time since the accident, the man in bed moved a finger. A single finger. But enough to change everything, enough to be the turning point. The room, which had previously seemed as silent as a chapel, now pulsed with a tense, almost electric energy. The heart monitor continued to emit rapid, irregular beeps, not of failure, but of activity, of life. Emily held her breath. Oliver seemed frozen. Leonard, for his part, felt an old and unfamiliar pressure taking over his chest. The doctor moved even closer to the patient, examining the finger that had moved. A small movement, almost imperceptible, but real. "Mr. Adams," the doctor called, testing his consciousness. "If you can hear, try moving your fingers again." For a few moments nothing happened, and then slowly the finger moved again, this time more firmly. Emily brought her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face without her realizing it. "Oh my God," she whispered. Oliver gripped Leonard's arm tightly. "He's coming back," said the boy, his voice trembling but full of hope. The doctor called nurses, adjusted equipment, checked reflexes, and murmured technical terms that no one there could follow. But it didn't matter, because the impossible, or what seemed impossible until a few minutes ago, was happening right before their eyes. When the activity stabilized and the medical team slowed down their frantic pace, the doctor approached Emily, Leonard, and Oliver. "I don't want to create unrealistic expectations," he said carefully, "but this type of response is rare and positive, very positive." Emily wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her blouse. "Is he waking up?" "Not yet," the doctor replied, "but he's reacting. That means his consciousness isn't completely disconnected. Someone is reaching him." The doctor's gaze fell on Oliver, and then on Leonard. "Sometimes," the doctor continued, "strong emotional stimuli can penetrate deep layers of the unconscious. We call this an evoked response." Leonard felt his stomach sink, because instinctively he knew that it had to do with him being there. In your own words, with his confessions, it's your fault, and with something you never imagined you could offer: presence. After the doctor left, Emily took a deep breath and turned to Leonard. "What did you say to him earlier?" she asked. Leonard hesitated. "Nothing extraordinary. I just talked about regrets, about time that will never return." Emily stepped forward. "Leonard, you need to understand something. Today, when you were in that room, you changed something, maybe in him, maybe in us, maybe in you." Her words had a different weight, gentle but undeniable. Leonard looked at the unconscious man on the bed, and for the first time since setting foot in that hospital, she felt something she couldn't name: responsibility, connection, purpose, and fear. Then something unexpected happened. Leonard's cell phone vibrated, not once, but several times, insistently. He looked at the screen. 15 missed calls. Brian, interim CEO advice. Urgent Hawthorne Industries. Image crisis news reports. Billionaire disappears amid internal rumours. Leonard felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. His life, the one he knew, shaped by steel, glass and numbers, was crumbling outside that hospital. But looking at Oliver and Emily, she realized something devastating. He didn't feel the urge to run off and save anything. Emily noticed his worried expression. "Problems, my company," he replied. "They're looking for me, and something big is happening." Before she could say anything, Oliver pulled Leonard's hand away. "You're not going anywhere, are you?" the boy asked, his voice breaking. Leonard knelt down to be at his level. "Oliver." "You promised," the boy insisted. "You said you'd stay until it was necessary." He wasn't being dramatic. He was telling the truth, the same truth that Leonard had never offered his own father. And there it was, the moment, the divider, the internal climax, the choice that would change everything. "Oliver," Leonard repeated, feeling the weight of the decision forming in his chest. "I'm going to stay." The boy threw his arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. Emily breathed a sigh of relief, but also of fear. A few minutes later, a nurse entered the room. "Miss Adams, we need you to sign some documents for the next stage of neurological monitoring." Emily nodded and followed the nurse. Oliver ran after her to get the Frank doll, and Leonard was left alone with the man in bed. He approached slowly, pulled up a chair, and sat down. The silence inside was strange, welcoming and threatening at the same time. Leonard held Oliver's father's hand. "I don't know if you can hear me," he began, "but thank you." He laughed, a short, awkward laugh. "Yes, I know. Thanking a man I don't even know. But you made me look at things I've spent years ignoring, maybe decades." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, I was a terrible son. I ran away from everything that hurt. I hid behind work, money, power, thinking that would make me strong. But in the end, only emptiness remained." His voice cracked. "I don't know if my father will ever wake up, but I know that you just showed me something I didn't have the courage to see." He closed his eyes. "I still have time, maybe not much. Maybe not enough, but I have some." And then the unconscious man moved his hand. Not a spasm, not a reflection, a conscious movement. His fingers squeezed, lightly but clearly, Leonard's hand. Leonard arched, incredulous. "Did you hear?" For an instant, a single, fragile instant, the man's eyes trembled beneath his eyelids, as if they were trying to open up, as if they were responding. The bedroom door slammed open. "What happened?" asked Emily, entering with Oliver. Leonard stood up, gesturing with a trembling voice. He shook my hand. Emily put her hands to her mouth. Oliver ran to the bed. "Okay?" As if answering the call, the man took a deep breath, a longer, deeper sigh than any he had taken since the accident, and for the first time his eyelids began to open, slowly, dormant, but opening up. Emily fell to her knees. Oliver began to cry. Leonard stood motionless, unable to process what was happening. The impossible was before them. The return, consciousness, the awakening. And at that exact moment, the lives of everyone there changed forever. The room, still silent, now seemed like a fragile sanctuary where any sudden movement could break the miracle that was taking place. The man's eyelids continued to tremble, opening only a few millimeters before closing again. It wasn't a complete awakening, but it was enough to turn the world upside down. Emily held his hand with both of hers, as if trying to protect him from disappearing again. Oliver rested the Frank doll on his father's chest, as if that gesture could call him back completely. Leonard took a few steps back, unsure, almost guilty for witnessing something so intimate. He didn't know if he should stay, or if he was intruding on a moment that didn't belong to him. But before she could decide, Emily raised her eyes, still glistening with tears. "Don't leave," she pleaded. You were part of this happening." Leonard felt an emotional shock he didn't know how to handle. He wasn't used to being needed by anyone, much less by a family he didn't even know before that day. The doctor rushed in, alerted by the vital signs that began to fluctuate. The team analyzed every detail, adjusted the machines, and checked neurological reflexes with meticulous precision. "He is responding to stimuli," the doctor confirmed. "It's not a full awakening, but it's significant progress. We will intensify the monitoring." Oliver kept his eyes fixed on his father, as if afraid of missing the moment. "Is he really going to wake up?" the boy asked, looking at the doctor. The doctor hesitated for a second, not out of hopelessness, but out of a sense of responsibility to choose his words carefully before such a small heart. "We're on the right track," he finally replied. Emily took a deep breath, a heavy and tense relief at the same time. Outside the room, Leonard leaned against the white wall of the hallway, finally letting the weight of the moment sink in. He picked up his cell phone. 17 calls, messages, news, alarms, investors, the board, rumors leaking to the press, analysts speculating about his disappearance as a prelude to resignation. His corporate life was on fire, and he was far from the flames. For the first time in years, perhaps in his entire adult life, he didn't feel compelled to rush to erase anything. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and anxiety. That environment, which should have been the opposite of everything he knew, was bringing more clarity than any boardroom, any meeting, any billion-dollar transaction. Emily left the room and stopped beside him. "Are you okay?" he asked. Leonard took a deep breath. "I have no idea. My life out there must be falling apart." She observed him carefully, almost as if studying the invisible cracks he was trying to hide. "And yet you're here," she said. He chuckled softly, without humor. "Perhaps because, for the first time, I want to be in the right place, not the expected place." Emily held his gaze for a few seconds. Then she briefly touched his arm, a simple gesture, but one that disarmed him more than it should have. Several hours passed. Tests, exams, more signs. The situation was unstable, but promising. The man continued to oscillate between moments of consciousness and deep sleep. The doctor decided that the next few hours would be critical. Leonard remained there, alternating between the bedroom and the hallway, unable to leave. While Oliver slept in an armchair, Emily tucked a blanket over her son and turned to Leonard. "You don't have to stay," she said, although her voice suggested otherwise. "I want to stay," he replied, before even thinking about the answer. She smiled, a tired, tense, but genuine smile. "So, stay." Emily returned to her husband's bedside, observing every involuntary movement, every slight alteration. Leonard approached silently. Seeing him there, Emily spoke softly, almost as if asking permission from the universe. "He was always a good man." Leonard nodded. "I know." She looked at him, surprised. "How?" Leonard took a deep breath. "Because Oliver is a good boy. And children always carry something from their parents, not just blood, but what they learn from their love." Emily took a deep breath, overcome with emotion, unable to respond. A sound interrupted the moment. The hospital door opened at the end of the corridor. 2 men in dark suits entered, accompanied by a woman with a leather briefcase. They all had the same expression: urgency, authority, and concern. Leonard recognized him immediately. Hawthorne Industries Board. His world had just caught up with him. The woman opened the folder, took out documents, and spoke in a low but firm tone. "Mr. Hawthorne, we need to discuss your temporary removal from the board. The company has suffered a communication breakdown since you disappeared. The shareholders are demanding immediate answers." Emily watched him in silence, not fully understanding what was happening. Leonard closed his eyes for half a second, just long enough to feel the brutality of that return to reality. But when she opened her eyes, she saw Oliver sleeping in the armchair. She saw Emily holding her husband's hand. He saw the man in bed struggling to come to, and he understood. He could not go back to being who he was. "Mr. Hawthorne?" the woman repeated. Leonard took a deep breath, and he replied, "I'll talk to you, but not now." The woman frowned. "Sir, this is highly inappropriate. The company is—" "My place is here," he interrupted, with a firmness that surprised even himself. "And it remains here until this family is safe." Emily felt breathless for a moment. The representatives exchanged indignant glances, but realized that pressuring him there would be pointless. They walked away, irritated, muttering about the consequences and irreparable damage. Leonard watched them walk away, and for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the consequences. He felt liberated. He went back to Emily and Oliver, and at that moment, more than ever, she realized that the life she needed to rebuild wasn't her professional life. She was human. Dawn broke slowly, as if time had been instructed to walk carefully around that room. Emily was still sitting beside the bed, watching every involuntary movement, every change on the monitors. Oliver slept soundly, still hugging the Frank doll, as if protecting his father from anything that might take him away again. Leonard remained silent, but in a way that wasn't uncomfortable. He was vigilant, present. There was a stark contrast between the man who had arrived at the hospital hours earlier and the one who now walked slowly around the room, adjusted the armchair, offered Emily water, checked if Oliver was covered. None of these gestures were natural to him. He didn't do them. He wasn't that kind of man. But it was becoming so, and I felt it, and he did not back down. Around 4 in the morning, the man in bed had another controlled spasm, not a sign of pain, but of voluntary neural activity. Emily immediately called the doctor, who returned with the same calm, attentive, and technical demeanor as always. After examining everything, he approached Emily and Leonard. "He is responding to increasingly complex stimuli," he explained. "This means we are progressing to a decisive phase. The next 24 hours will be crucial." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with hope and exhaustion at the same time. Leonard watched the doctor intently. "Is there anything we can do?" he asked. The doctor looked at him in a way that seemed to see deeper than he wanted to. "Stay close. Keep talking. He's listening. His mind is struggling to come back." Emily held her husband's hand more firmly. For a moment, Leonard wished someone had told him that when he was younger, that his father's mind might also be trying to return, that perhaps his presence would have made a difference. But nobody said anything, and he didn't stay. And his father didn't come back. Now there, a reflection of that was happening before his eyes, and he had the chance to do things differently. Hours later, with the sun timidly entering the hallway, Oliver woke up, rubbing his eyes. As soon as he saw his father, he ran to the edge of the bed. "Is he better?" he asked. Emily smiled. "He's fighting, son." Leonard approached. "He's listening to you, Oliver. Keep talking to him." The boy held his father's hand. "Dad, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, okay?" Leonard felt his throat tighten. The strength of that child was both brutal and beautiful at the same time. Oliver turned to Leonard. "You're staying too, right?" Leonard knelt beside the boy, looking him in the eyes with an honesty he hadn't even used in meetings with billionaires. "I'll stay until the end." Oliver nodded, satisfied, as if that were the most important answer of his life. Emily watched the scene, silently, assessing, absorbing. Something was changing there, not just in Oliver's father, nor just in that family's life, but in Leonard. And that scared her, and it comforted her at the same time. Around noon, Leonard finally left his room to breathe the cold air outside. The morning light reflected off the cars in the parking lot, forming silvery patterns that made the scene almost poetic. Or perhaps his perspective had changed too much to perceive things as before. 2 of the advisors who had gone after him were still waiting for him. "Mr. Hawthorne, we need an immediate answer," said the first of them. "The press is speculating about your permanent departure. There are fears of a stock market collapse." Leonard crossed his arms. The company has already survived without my father. It survived with me. It will survive for a few more hours without me. Hours! The second advisor exclaimed. Sir, the market doesn't work like that. Leonard took a deep breath, but this time not with irritation, with understanding. I know, he said. I don't work that way anymore. The council members remained silent, perplexed. You'll have my answer, Leonard continued, but I'll give it when I know what the right decision is, not the expected one, not the most convenient one, the correct one. The men didn't understand, and perhaps never would, but Leonard didn't need that anymore. He went back inside the hospital, and as he walked down the hallway, something inside him, something that had always been buried, began to emerge forcefully. Emotional responsibility, genuine care, courage to feel, and that transformed him. During the afternoon, Emily was sitting beside her husband's bed when she looked at Leonard. Do you have any idea what this means for your life out there? He asked. Leonard took a deep breath. I have. And even so, it stayed. Yes. Emily stared at him as if trying to decipher a code. Then she lowered her gaze to her husband. You're changing, Leonard. He didn't answer, not because he disagreed, but because he finally understood that change came from within and didn't need to be announced. She continued, and changes like that usually happen for a reason. Leonard looked her in the eyes, and for a brief second, the two shared a silent understanding, one that didn't need words. It was something simple. It's dangerous. It's real. The doctor returned in the late afternoon. We are ready to attempt a more intense stimulation phase, he announced. It's possible he will try to open his eyes completely. Be prepared. The process may be slow, but it is significant. Emily squeezed her husband's hand. Oliver rested his head on his arm. Leonard stood behind them, part of that unexpected circle of strength, and the doctor activated the stimuli. Everyone's heart beat in the same rhythm. The man took a deep breath. Her eyelids twitched, and then, very slowly, they began to open up. The world seemed to hold its breath along with them. Emily leaned over her husband, her face lit up with the hope she had tried to suppress for hours. Oliver rose on tiptoe, holding his father's arm, as if trying to help him physically return. Leonard instinctively took a step forward without even realizing he had been holding his breath. The man's eyelids in bed fluttered again. Another tremor, an effort. And then, slowly, as if awakening from a sleep too deep to be remembered, his eyes opened, not completely, but enough to reveal a hazy, lost, confused, and alive gleam. Emily brought her hand to her mouth, a sob escaping before she could even stop it. Love, I'm here, she whispered, her voice faltering mid-sentence. Oliver immediately climbed to the edge of the bed, kneeling beside his father. Dad, look here, it's me, I'm here. You're back. You're back with us. The man's eyes moved toward the sound of his son, slowly, heavily, but obediently. A millisecond later, a tear trickled down the corner of her eyelid, and that was more powerful than any words. The doctor observed everything with professional attention, but there was a subtle glint in his eyes. He is conscious, but not yet fully awake, he explained. His movements are limited, and speech may not come immediately, but he is reacting to his environment. That's extraordinary. Emily nodded frantically. Leonard remained silent, studying every detail of the situation, not just the clinical signs, but the emotional impact, the fragility, the courage, the brutal and unwavering love that emanated from that family. And something inside him tightened so hard that it hurt, because never, not once in his entire life, had anyone looked at him that way. Someone who would cry for the chance to hold him back, someone to pray for him, someone to call it home. He suddenly realized why that scene had broken him inside from the start. That was everything he never had, and everything he never knew he wanted. Until now. The doctor advised, talk to him. Your voice is the strongest point of reference right now. Emily cupped her husband's face in both hands. I'm here, love. You're safe, okay? You're with us. Oliver rested his head on his father's chest. Leonard hesitated. For a moment he thought he shouldn't get involved, that he wasn't part of it, that he was crossing boundaries that hadn't even existed for him until a few days before. But then the half-closed gaze of the man in bed shifted, trying to focus. And for a second it seemed to stare directly at Leonard, as if trying to understand who he was, why he was there, why he showed so much concern for people who clearly weren't his family, and Leonard felt he owed something to that look. He took a step forward, placing his hand on the bed frame. His voice came out low but firm. You fought hard. Keep going. Your family is here, and you still have so much to live for. Emily looked up at him, surprised by the emotion in his voice. Oliver then added, as if completing the circle, And you promised you wouldn't leave me, remember? The father's eyelid twitched, as if trying to answer. Leonard turned his face discreetly, feeling an unexpected weight crush his chest, a weight that came accompanied by something even more frightening, the desire to stay. Later, as the medical team adjusted the equipment, and Emily tried to calm Oliver down so he could rest a bit, Leonard stepped back a few paces, observing the scene like an intruder who, paradoxically, could no longer escape that reality. Emily approached him, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. He recognized us, she said. I saw it in his eyes. He knows we're here. Leonard nodded. He knows. And that will pull him back even harder. Emily studied her face for a moment. You look different, he said. You seem lighter, even with all of this. I don't know if it's lightness, he replied, looking back at her husband. I think it's something else. I think it's humanity. Emily smiled in a way that was sad, sweet, and dangerous all at once. It's good to see you like this. Leonard held her gaze, sensing territory he shouldn't be treading on, approaching too quickly. But he did not deviate, and neither did she, until the doctor reappeared, breaking the silent line that had formed between the two. We need to talk, he said. Emily became tense. Leonard, too. The situation is positive, the doctor continued, but there's an important decision to be made regarding the final neural stabilization procedure. It's risky, but it could speed up a full recovery. Emily swallowed hard. How risky? The doctor took a deep breath. Enough for you to think calmly. This is the step that could determine whether he fully recovers or whether we will have a dangerous setback. Emily looked at her husband. Oliver, exhausted, slept beside him, and Leonard, without realizing it, was already drawing closer again, as if fate were pulling him to the center of that decision. It was the beginning of the climax, from the point of no return, the choice that would change everything. The silence that filled the room wasn't just an absence of sound, it was the weight of something enormous about to happen, a moment so fragile and so explosive that everyone there seemed afraid even to breathe. Emily stared at the doctor, her eyes wide, as if the mere existence of that decision was already cruel. Oliver slept beside his father, too exhausted to realize that their world was about to tip one way or another. Leonard. Leonard felt as if he had one foot on each precipice. Half of him was telling him to get out of there, that it wasn't his business, that he had no right to get involved. But the other half, the half that seemed to have awakened since that man opened his eyes, pulled him closer, inward, to the center of that family that didn't even know it needed him. The doctor placed a clipboard on the bed, opened a screen displaying the neural graph, and took a deep breath before explaining. The final stabilization procedure will attempt to rebuild neurological connections that have been compromised. It's a complex intervention. There's a chance he could wake up fully lucid in less than 24 hours. Emily's eyes widened, her heart clearly racing. But there's also a risk, the doctor continued. He could regress, or suffer a neural overload that causes him to revert to his initial state. Leonard felt his throat go dry. Emily bit her lower lip, her eyes glistening with tears she struggled to hold back. "Do I have to decide this on my own?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You are the wife." "Legally, yes," the doctor replied kindly. "But of course you can talk to whomever you want first." Emily instinctively turned to Leonard. And that's when he realized. She trusted him. She trusted him in a way that made no sense, that defied logic, history, and context. She trusted him as if he were more than a rich stranger who had shown up at an auction, more than a lonely millionaire who didn't know how to deal with feelings. They trusted him as if he were part of their survival. Leonard's breathing was only failing on the inside. "Leonard," she said in a whisper, "what do I do?" He swallowed hard. He felt that any word he spoke would carry too much weight. "Emily." "That's your decision," he replied, lowering his voice. "But whatever you decide, I'll be here." Her eyes filled with tears of relief when she heard that, not because he had answered the question, but because he had finally included himself. "I won't be around. No, you can count on me, but I'll be here. Point. No way." Emily took a deep breath, wiped her face, and shook her head. I need to think." She walked to the window, watching the fog that was beginning to descend over the city. Leonard stood there, watching her, and for the first time since they had known each other, he saw something in her that he had never noticed so clearly before. Fear. Not the fear of losing her husband, but the fear of making the wrong choice and living with it forever. He finally approached, stopping beside her. "Talk to me," she said softly. "Why are you so conflicted?" Emily tightened her arms around her own body. "Because if I do nothing, maybe he'll wake up naturally. And if I do something, he might come back sooner, but he might also—" Her voice faltered. "He might never come back again." Leonard looked at her with a sincerity that almost hurt. "Emily, you fought this far for him, and he fought this far for you. None of this would be possible if you weren't who you are. Nothing will destroy this connection." She turned slightly toward him, too vulnerable. "You talk as if you know what that's like, but you don't," she said, without meaning to hurt. "You've never had someone who depended on you like this, never had to make a choice that could destroy your own family." Leonard did not deviate. "No," he admitted. "I never had a family. I never had anyone who wanted me around." Emily closed her eyes, realizing too late what her words had touched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Leonard shook his head. "No, you only told the truth. But now, for the first time, I understand. I understand why you fight so much, why your love hurts." Emily looked at him as if she were seeing Leonard for the first time. And at that moment, before any of them could respond to what they were feeling, the heart monitor beeped faster. Emily turned around immediately. "What is happening?" The doctor ran back to the machine. "The neural activity is increasing on its own," he explained, surprised. "It's fluctuating too fast. It's trying to wake up, all by itself." Emily ran to the side of the bed, taking her husband's hand. "Honey, I'm here," she said desperately. Oliver woke up startled, rubbing his eyes. Leonard approached from behind them, his stomach clenched in knots. The doctor frantically evaluated the data. "This isn't normal," he murmured. "He's pushing the biological limits. He could enter neural exhaustion, or he could fully awaken." The whole room seemed to pulsate. Emily was crying, holding her husband's hand tightly. Oliver squeezed the other side, repeating, "Dad, stay with us," and then, suddenly, the man's eyes in the bed opened, not half, not confused, not vague, but clear, targeted, conscious. He looked at Emily, for Oliver, and then for Leonard, as if he knew exactly who he was, and why was he there. Emily sobbed. Leonard held his breath, and then, with effort, with pain, with the hoarse voice of someone who had returned from the impossible, the man spoke. "I heard you." Emily broke down in tears. Oliver shouted with joy. Leonard felt something inside him break and rebuild itself at the same time. But Emily's husband wasn't finished. He looked directly at Leonard, firm, lucid, as if he already knew the whole truth, and said, "We need to talk." And so, the climax was fully established. What was about to be revealed would change everything. For Emily, for Oliver, and for Leonard. The entire room hung in the air, as if no one dared to breathe until that man, newly returned to the world, uttered his next word. Emily stood motionless, tears still streaming down her face, but now a mixture of fear and hope. Oliver, his heart racing, gripped his father's hand tightly, almost desperately. Leonard felt his chest tightening with something he couldn't name. Was that joy? Guilt, gratitude, or fear? Fear that this man, with a single move, would undo everything he had begun to feel for this family. Emily's husband took a deep breath, still fragile but determined. He began, his voice hoarse. "I heard everything for weeks. You thought I was far away, but I was here, trapped, but listening, feeling." Emily covered her mouth in surprise. Leonard took a step closer, without realizing what was driving him. The man turned his face slowly, staring at Leonard, as if he recognized him from a time he never even lived through. "You," he said with effort, "stayed here when you could have left. I never understood why, but I heard his voice." His gaze fell briefly on Oliver. "And I heard yours, too." Leonard swallowed hard. "I didn't know if I should answer. I wasn't sure if I had the right." But Emily's husband continued. "You spoke to him as if you were already a part of his life." Emily glanced quickly at Leonard, surprised and unsure what to think. Leonard took a deep breath, trying to stay in one piece. He began to say, but Emily interrupted him, touching his arm. "Leonard stayed because without him, we wouldn't have made it." Her husband turned to his wife, his eyes welling with tears. "I heard everything you went through. I heard your strength. I heard your fear. And I heard the loneliness. Even surrounded by people, you were alone." Emily collapsed, resting her forehead against his hand. "I just wanted you back," she cried. He stroked her fingers with what little strength he had left. "I went back." And then, as if he had waited until that moment to gather his courage, he turned his gaze to Leonard. "You came into their lives when they were broken, and you stayed. Why?" Leonard took a deep breath, his chest tightening. He didn't know what that man wanted to hear. But he knew he needed to be honest, perhaps for the first time. "Because," he began, his voice faltering, "because I've never seen a family fight like this. I've never seen love like this. And," his eyes met Emily's, even unintentionally, "I've discovered that some things are worth staying for, even when it's not about us." A profound silence filled the room. Emily looked away, touched and frightened. Her husband took a deep breath, and then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. A tired, weak but genuine smile. "Thank you," he said, "for taking care of them when I couldn't." Leonard felt the ground disappear beneath him for a moment. He expected distrust. I was expecting jealousy. I was expecting anger. But gratitude, this destroyed him from the inside. Emily gripped her husband's hand tighter, crying with relief, but the man was still not finished. He took a deep breath, looking at the two of them, Emily and Leonard, with a clarity that seemed almost supernatural to someone who had just come back to life. "I know there's something there," he said, with unbelievable serenity. Emily froze. Leonard, too. "I heard," he continued, gazing at Emily with love and vulnerability. "The way you talked about him, even when you didn't realize it. The way your voice changed when he arrived." Emily blushed and trembled. "No, it's not," she tried to say. "I'm not angry," he interrupted gently. "I was trapped in a place where only voices existed, and yours was the only one that brought me back. His kept you all going." Leonard squeezed his eyes shut, as if he were holding back an internal explosion. Emily cried silently, and then the man finished. "The three of us are alive today, because each of us held onto a part of this story. There is no blame here, only choices from here on out." Leonard felt the world stop. It was at that moment that a doctor rushed in, drawing attention. "He can't talk so much. His blood pressure is fluctuating." The doctor approached to adjust the equipment, and the emotional atmosphere in the room was suspended, but not resolved. Emily wiped away her tears, touching her husband's forehead. Leonard took a step back, his heart at war. Oliver climbed onto the bed, hugging his father tightly. And then, before Leonard could leave the room, Emily's husband called him again. "Leonard." Leonard turned slowly. "I still want to talk to you," the man said with surprising firmness, "but not today, when I get better." Leonard nodded, feeling the weight of that promise. When the lights dimmed and the doctor asked everyone to let the patient rest, Emily walked over to Leonard. She seemed devastated and strengthened at the same time. "You have no idea what you've done for us," she said in a whisper. Leonard shook his head. "I haven't done anything that you wouldn't do for me." Emily looked at him with something indefinable, something that was neither forbidden love, nor debt, nor confusion. It was something new, deep, dangerous. "Leonard, nothing will be the same after today." And she was right. Nothing would happen. The following days seemed to exist in a dimension of their own, neither slow nor fast, just laden with too much meaning to fit into the hours. The hospital became a territory of transition, where life, fear, and hope mingled in silence. Emily's husband, now fully conscious, still frail but lucid, was progressing faster than any doctor dared predict. The team spoke of exceptional recovery, unusual resilience, emotional connection as a neural stimulus. But no one really understood what had happened there. Except for those three, there was something between them that couldn't be explained in medical records, something that had pushed each of them beyond their own limits. And now, with the worst behind them, the future finally demanded an answer. 3 days after waking up, Emily's husband asked to meet Leonard alone. Emily hesitated for a moment, but left the two of them with a look full of confidence and fear at the same time. Leonard entered the room slowly, as if that single step were more dangerous than anything he had faced in recent months. The man was sitting on the bed, propped up on pillows, his skin still pale, but his eyes steady. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low but steady. Leonard nodded, anticipating the impact, but no attack came, no suspicion, no accusation. The man took a deep breath. "I don't know how you feel about my wife. I don't know how she feels about you. I don't even know how you feel about yourself." Leonard lowered his gaze, swallowing hard. "But I know," the husband continued, "that you saved my family. You saved my life. And that without you, none of this would be happening now." A pause. "Heavy? So, before life goes on, I needed to tell you this, looking you in the eyes. I'm not afraid of you." Leonard felt the impact. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't what I deserved. Maybe he didn't even know what to do with it. "I didn't come here to take up any space," Leonard finally replied. "I just stayed, because they needed someone. And because," he hesitated, "because I needed them too." Emily's husband smiled, a sad and wise smile. "That's what makes everything so complicated, isn't it?" Leonard didn't answer. There was no right answer. When Emily returned to the room, she found the two of them in silence. And surprisingly, it wasn't a hostile silence. It was a silence of understanding. She felt a tightening sensation in her chest. It wasn't love, it wasn't guilt, it was change. The realization that life had been rewritten, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. "He'll be discharged in a few days," Emily said, almost in a whisper. Leonard nodded. "That is great," but the phrase sounded bitter, surprising even to him. Emily realized it, and it affected her more than it should have. "Leonard," she said, almost touching his arm, but stopping the gesture midway. "You were a part of this. A part of us. No matter how things turn out from here on out, you won't disappear from our lives." He closed his eyes for a moment, because that was exactly what he wanted most, and that was exactly what he feared most. Hours later, when Leonard left the hospital, Oliver ran after him. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" he asked, breathless. Leonard smiled, a genuine smile. "I'm going, yes." Oliver hugged him with unexpected force, and in that embrace, Leonard understood. It didn't matter what happened between adults. The connection that had been formed there was real, and it was already a part of their lives. And yet, something deep within warned them that their world was about to change again, but this time not because of tragedy. And yes, it was about what each one would decide to do with the truth that finally existed between them. A few months later, life finally seemed to have found a new rhythm. Emily's husband was walking without support, Oliver had returned to school, and the house breathed a different kind of silence, not of absence, but of rebuilding. Leonard visited them frequently, not out of necessity, but because, in a way, he was now part of that place. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the backyard, Emily's husband watched Leonard playing with Oliver and said softly, "Life has given us back more than it has taken away." Emily smiled, and for a moment everyone seemed exactly where they were supposed to be. If this story moved you, if it stirred any emotion, any memory, or any desire to look differently at the relationships that surround you, share it. Talk about it with someone. Reread passages that touched you. Stories exist for this, to remind us of what we are still capable of feeling, protecting, and transforming. Leave a comment. Tell us which character impacted you the most and what you would have done in their place. Your vision can help others see new possibilities within their own lives.